What if retirement wasn't something that happens at 65? What if you could move that timeline forward to, say, 50, 40, or even 30 years old? Would you still do your day job? How would you spend your time? Who would you become if your job no longer decided how your days looked? Those are the questions at the heart of the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. Not as a fantasy, not as a one day, maybe, but as a real, achievable framework for designing freedom on your own terms. It sounds radical, maybe even unrealistic, until you realize there's already a growing global community of people quietly doing exactly that. People who've stopped waiting for permission to live life on their own terms and who have dared to live a life a little differently. You've built the career, you're building the portfolio, you're close to freedom. So what now? Welcome to Life After Enough, money, meaning, and the life you design when work becomes optional. I'm Nick. I'm racing towards early retirement and figuring out who I become when the job no longer dictates what I do with my time. Let's get into it. In today's episode, we're going to dig into the nuts and bolts of the FIRE movement, what it is, how it actually works, its various flavors, and why it's about so much more than just money. So I came across FIRE in April 2020, right in the middle of Singapore's COVID lockdown. The world had gone quiet. Work had slowed down. The usual distractions were gone. For the first time in years, without the ability to do anything fun or socialize, I had space to think. One night, I stumbled on a blog called Get Rich Slowly. Just a simple article about what they termed to be the 6 stages of financial independence. So stage 0 is dependence, and that's when your lifestyle relies on someone else's money. Stage 1 is solvency, and that's where you can meet your commitments without outside help. Stage 2 is stability, and that's where you've cleared all of your consumer debt. Stage 3 is agency, and that's where you have the freedom to live and work as you choose. Stage 4 is security, and that's where your investments cover your basic financial needs. Stages 5 and 6 are independence, so your investments sustain your current lifestyle completely, and then abundance, where you have enough and then some. It was the first time I'd ever seen money laid out like that, a kind of step-by-step roadmap toward financial freedom. And it was a huge light bulb moment. I could suddenly see my place on the roadmap and the path ahead of me. To my hyper-organized OCD brain, it was love at first sight. Just a small problem, though. I had absolutely no idea how to actually progress through the stages. Up until that point, I wasn't just climbing a corporate ladder to get to where I wanted to go. I was trying every ladder I could find. I built a legal career in London, which I then later walked away from completely to run a mountain fitness company that honestly didn't work out the way I hoped. I then hustled to build my own legal practice at a small startup law firm, which was going very well. And on paper, I'd done all the right things. I was ambitious, entrepreneurial, busy. But underneath it all, I was directionless with my finances. And on top of that, I couldn't really see myself doing any of it for another 30 years. I craved the freedom that those financial independence stages seemed to offer. And not just for me, but also to give back to my family, to know that if my parents ever needed financial support, I could step in without hesitation. I wanted to provide stability for the people I love, and this FIRE concept suddenly gave me a framework for doing that. So fast forward a few nights later, as is typical with me, I was getting obsessed. In the process of falling down the FIRE rabbit hole, I found the blog that really changed everything, Mr. Money Mustache. His tone was completely different to everything else I was reading. Part math teacher, part rebel philosopher, and part bootcamp instructor. And the post that hit me like a lightning bolt was the shockingly simple math behind early retirement. It laid out in plain numbers how it was your savings rate and not your income that determines how long you need to work before retirement. So if you're saving 10%, you'll work roughly 40 years. Save 50%, well, then that comes down to more like 17 years. And if you can save 70%, it can get as low as 8 years. I remember sitting there thinking, wait, that's it? For my entire adult life, I'd been focused on my income and didn't even really pay attention to my savings rate. I believed that if you just earned more, everything else would just fall into place, that a bigger salary would automatically mean a better life. But with every promotion came more pressure, more politics, more stress, and inevitably I'd spend the difference that I earned on holidays or bursts of escapism, trying to soothe my poor, overworked, corporate, tortured soul. I was also totally missing the other pillars of enough. What Mr. Money Mustache showed, though, wasn't magic, although it did feel like that at the time. It wasn't luck, a big lottery win or an inheritance. It was simply math and discipline, applied consistently and intentionally. For the first time, financial freedom felt tangible, even doable. So I went all in. Books, blogs, YouTube videos, podcasts, anything I could get my hands on. I still remember my favorite ritual during the COVID lockdowns was walking through the deserted CBD of Singapore and listening to Choose FI, which is a podcast, just imagining what life could look like if work was truly optional. What hooked me wasn't the spreadsheets or the numbers. It was this new life philosophy I'd found. The idea that you don't have to wait for permission to live the life you've really dreamed of. I've talked enough about finding FIRE, but I haven't actually explained what FIRE is beyond the catchy acronym. FIRE isn't about retiring early. It's about options. I've got zero interest in spending the next 30 years lying on a beach drinking umbrella cocktails. But I'd love the freedom to wake up one day and decide, you know what, maybe today I will lie on a beach and drink umbrella cocktails. And that's the difference. Choice over obligation. The premise of FIRE is super simple. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference. And then let compound interest quietly do its thing. Once your investments can sustain your lifestyle without needing income from a paycheck, you've reached financial independence. And suddenly, work becomes optional. So, okay, that sounds amazing. But how does it actually work? Well, at the center of FIRE is something called the 4% rule, though honestly, I think of it more as a guideline rather than a rule. It comes from a study back in the 1990s by a financial planner named Bill Bengen. He wanted to answer one big question. How much can you safely withdraw from your investments each year without running out of money, even if markets crash, even if inflation spikes? So what he did is to go back and analyze decades of stock market data, and what he found was pretty comforting. If you invested in a balanced mix of stocks and bonds and withdrew about 4% of your portfolio in the first year, and then adjusted that number for inflation each year thereafter, your money would have lasted at least 30 years in almost every scenario that he played with. A few years later, researchers from Trinity University double-checked his math. That became the famous Trinity Study. And they found the same thing. In fact, their data showed that most of the time, people who followed the 4% rule didn't avoid running out of money. They often ended up with more than they started with. Fast forward to today, and Bill Bengen is still refining his work. In his new book, A Richer Retirement, published in August 2025, he actually bumps up that number slightly to somewhere between 4.5 and 4.7%. But for most of us, the key takeaway is beautifully simple. Take your annual spending, multiply it by 25, and that's roughly your freedom number. So if you want to spend $40,000 a year in retirement or after financial independence, you'll need 1 million saved up. 80,000, you'll need 2 million. 120,000, you'll need 3 million, and so on. It's not a perfect science. Markets change, inflation moves, but it's an empowering framework. It gives you a clear target and sense that financial independence isn't some distant fantasy. It's a real workable plan. For me, that was the moment it all became real, when financial freedom stopped being this abstract dream and started feeling like something I could actually build, one choice at a time. And here's the bit most people miss. This whole calculation is based on your spending and not your income. So linking to what we discussed earlier, income is not the driving force. It's actually the difference between income and spending, your savings rate, which is. That's what makes it so powerful, because If you can reduce your spending even slightly, your FIRE number drops too. Every $1,000 you shave off your annual expenses, well, that's $25,000 less you need to reach financial independence. Small lifestyle tweaks like renting instead of buying for a few years or trimming those invisible subscriptions can literally buy you years of freedom. Okay, so now we know what FIRE actually is and how to work out your own enough number. Next, let's move from the math to the mindset and explore the different flavors of FIRE, because as it turns out, there's more than one way to live financially free. Quick pause. If this episode is sparking something for you, hit follow so you don't miss what's coming next. Feel free to share it with someone who'd love it too. It really helps the show to grow. One of the things I love the most about FIRE is that it isn't a one-size-fits-all program. There are flavors, like different routes up the same mountain. You pick the one that fits your lifestyle, your risk tolerance, and what's right for you. So in addition to traditional FIRE, which we just discussed, we've got lean FIRE, fat FIRE, coast FIRE, and barista FIRE, and plenty in between. Lean FIRE is the live simple, retire sooner version of financial independence. It's all about designing a life that's low cost, low stress, and high on intention. You don't need millions in the bank. You just need enough to cover a modest, contented life. For most people on this path, that means focusing on what actually adds value and stripping out all of the rest. A smaller home, a cheaper city, no eating out, fewer impulse buys, maybe even getting joy from things that cost nothing, long walks, time outdoors, or slow mornings that aren't spent commuting. It's not about deprivation, but it is about clarity. People who reach lean FIRE often build lives that feel calm, deliberate, flexible. They've traded the stress of the grind for time to think, to build, and to breathe. If you never hit full FIRE, just getting to lean FIRE can be life-changing. Knowing that your basics are covered gives you freedom, the kind that lets you make choices from confidence, not fear. You might not have everything, but you finally have enough. Next on the list, fat FIRE. And this is the kind of comfort and choice version of financial independence. It's for people who love the idea of freedom, but also really love nice things. Same principles, just with a bit more breathing room. You still save, invest, and work towards independence, but your goal number is far higher because your lifestyle includes more luxuries. Travel, good food, even personal trainers, and a villa that you always rent in the summer. The idea isn't excess, it's ease. You want to be able to say yes to the things that genuinely make life feel rich, without the guilt or financial anxiety. Someone who's fat FIRE might still be working, but then if they do, it's from a place of want, not need. They might consult part-time, start a business they care about, or take 6 months off to live somewhere totally new. For me, this is the version of FIRE that's always been the most appealing, as it's freedom with flexibility. It's having options without compromise. Next is Coast FIRE, and this is one of my favorite versions because it's all about momentum. It's what happens when you've already invested enough early on that even if you stopped investing completely, your money would still grow and eventually carry you to full financial independence, all on its own at a later date. You're not there yet, but you're coasting towards it. And that's a fantastic place to be because once you hit Coast FIRE, the pressure lifts. You no longer need to save half of your income or constantly optimize every expense. You can choose work that's lighter or slower or more fun. You can take a sabbatical, change industries, start something creative without feeling like you're falling behind. For a lot of people, this is where life starts to feel balanced again. You're still building wealth, but you're also living. Vision of financial independence that's not about quitting. It's about relaxing into progress. The final one is barista FIRE, and this is for people who want more balance, but now, not in 20 years' time. It's the middle ground between full financial independence and the traditional grind. The idea is simple. Your investments cover your basic expenses, like with lean FIRE, things like rent, food, bills, while part-time work, consulting, or passion projects pay for the extras that make life fun. It's called barista because, in theory, you could quit your full-time corporate job, pick up a part-time role at a cafe, and you would still be financially stable. These days, it's more of a metaphor. You could be a yoga teacher, start a business, freelance, or work on something creative that wouldn't have been possible before. The beauty of barista FIRE is flexibility. You still have income, but the pressure is gone. You're not hustling for survival. You're working for enjoyment, connection, and purpose. It's the version of FIRE that really feels quite human. It recognizes that most of us don't actually want to stop working. We just want to stop needing to work. People who reach Barista FIRE often describe it as the happiest they've ever been. Fewer hours, more meaning, and just enough structure to keep life interesting. And if full FIRE feels a long way off, this is an incredible halfway point. It buys you back time and sanity, and that's a great return on investment. The thing I love about all of these versions of FIRE is that there's no single right way to do it. You can go lean or fat or coast or barista or float somewhere in between. The point isn't to win some competition or tick a box on a spreadsheet. It's to find the version of freedom that fits your life. Because at its core, FIRE isn't really about money. It's about alignment. Creating a life that feels like you and having the financial stability to live it on your own terms. Whether that means living quietly and debt-free, building abundance and traveling the world, or simply taking the pressure off so that you can breathe again, it all counts. The real goal isn't early retirement. It's the ability to look at your calendar and know that everything on there is because you choose it. And that would be an amazing place to be. So now we've explored the flavors of FIRE. Let's clear up a few of the biggest myths that tend to swirl around it. Because for every person inspired by the FIRE movement, there's usually someone rolling their eyes and saying, oh, so you just quit your job and live off rice and beans forever? Well, not quite. There are a few misconceptions worth untangling, because understanding what FIRE isn't is just as important as understanding what it is. So let's start with the big one. Myth number 1, the idea that FIRE is only for the wealthy. Reality check, it is not. You don't need a 6-figure salary or a trust fund to make progress towards financial independence. What you need is consistency, awareness, and a bit of creativity. The math behind FIRE actually works at almost any income level because it's not about how much you earn. It's about the gap between what you earn and what you spend. Even a small savings rate like 5, 10, 15%, it compounds massively over time. The key is to getting started, staying consistent, and making each year slightly better than the last. If you're in a lower income phase right now, FIRE doesn't have to mean quitting work forever. It can simply mean building options. Options like a buffer that lets you leave a toxic job, a year off to retrain or travel, a cushion that makes emergencies less scary. And that's still financial independence. That's just your version of it. I've met people who earn modest salaries and still build incredible freedom into their lives through smart choices, house hacking, side projects, learning new skills, even geo arbitrage. The point isn't how fast you get there. The point is that you start walking the path, because every step towards financial independence is a step towards control, dignity, and peace of mind. And that's true whether you're earning $30,000 a year or $300,000 a year. Okay, myth 2, and this is the second big misconception about FIRE, that you have to quit your job, that it's mandatory, else you don't get to be fired. You know, never earning $1 again and spending the rest of your life sitting around doing nothing. But that entirely misses the point. FIRE isn't about not working. It's about not needing to work for money. And that's a huge difference. Once you've built financial independence, work becomes optional, not an obligation. Being able to say, I'm going to keep doing the same thing because I love it, or I'm done with this chapter. I want to try something new. Many people who reach FIRE don't actually stop working. They just work differently. They take lower paid but more meaningful roles, start passion projects, volunteer, or even build small businesses that would have felt too risky before. You might still choose to work full time, but you'll do it from a place of power, not pressure. This is because FIRE gives you leverage. You can negotiate better conditions, take career breaks, or walk away entirely if something no longer serves you. To me, that's what makes this movement so powerful. It's the reason I reorganized my life entirely to reach FIRE as soon as possible. That in turn allowed me to have a 6-month sabbatical and the mental space to think properly about what's next. It's not about escaping work. It's about escaping dependence. Once money stops being the main driver, curiosity and purpose have a chance to take over. The third big misconception about FIRE is that it's only for people who want to live on rice and beans and live in a van somewhere. You know, the stereotype: sell everything, move to a cabin in the woods, and track every expense down to the nearest cent. But that's not what this movement is about either. Yes, some people genuinely love an ultra-frugal lifestyle, and that's great. But for most of us, FIRE isn't about deprivation. It's about intention. It's about using your money and your time for purpose. The real key to FIRE is the gap between what you earn and what you spend. You can widen that gap from either side by spending less on the things that don't matter, or by finding ways to earn more doing things that do matter, whether that is a promotion, a side project, or a creative business that excites you. For many people, growing the income can be just as powerful, if not more so, than cutting costs. Remember, there's no cap on how much you can earn, but there is a cap of how low you can go with cutting. Personally, I've never been a minimalist. I love good food, I love spending time with friends, and my Achilles heel has always been travel. I wasn't looking to become a frugal hermit living off lentils. That was never my dream. So instead of cutting to the bone, I focused on the other side of the equation, increasing my income. I poured my energy into growing my career, negotiating better deals, and finding ways to earn more so I could build freedom without giving up on the things that genuinely make me happy. But what FIRE did for me was change how I spend. It helped me get really intentional, to focus on the things that genuinely add value and joy to my life and stop wasting money on stuff that doesn't. Kind of like Ramit Sethi's philosophy of living your rich life, spending freely on what matters and cutting mercilessly on what doesn't. That mindset shift for me has been huge, and it's allowed me to live fully, travel well, eat great food, and still move towards independence at the same time. Okay, myth 5, and maybe the most common of all, that it's too late to start. I wish I'd known about FIRE 10 years ago. It's too late for me now. I get that message all the time, but it's never too late to build a more intentional relationship with money. You might not reach full financial independence by 45. Hey, you might already be 55, but you can still create degrees of freedom. Maybe it's paying off debt. Maybe it's building an emergency fund. Maybe it's investing enough that work starts to feel optional, even if it's just one day a week less. Every step towards financial stability you take makes your life more flexible and less fragile. Some people who start later on do it better because they know what really matters to them. They're not chasing arbitrary goals or lifestyle comparisons. They're designing something intentional. As they say, the best time to start something was yesterday, sure. But the second best time is right now, while you still have the chance to change the story. What's been really interesting and pretty comforting to watch over the past few years in particular is how the FIRE movement has evolved. When it first took off, FIRE had this reputation for being, well, a bit extreme, and only for those who want to live that frugal hermit lifestyle in a van for 10 years plus. That early version of FIRE was bold. It was designed to wake people up. It challenged a system that said the only path to freedom was 40 years of work, followed by a gold watch and a golf club. No, thank you. But over time, the movement has matured. People actually reached financial independence. The math worked. And then they had this slightly awkward realization of, I'm free now, but what exactly am I supposed to do with that? That's when the conversation started to shift from the how of FIRE to the why, from the how do I get out to what am I moving towards. And that's really where this podcast, Life After Enough, lives. Because in my view, money is just the first layer. It's the foundation that gives you breathing room. But once you've built it, the real work begins, figuring out how to build a life that actually fits you. For me, that's where the modern FIRE movement is heading as well, away from rigid frugality and towards something much more human. It's about emotional wellness, relationships, identity, purpose, and creativity, about designing your life on purpose instead of just reacting to what's expected of you. And that's what we're here to explore, not just the numbers, but what happens after them. Once the spreadsheets are done and the goal is reached, what then? How do you find meaning when the metrics disappear? Who are you when your work no longer defines you, your income, or your achievements? How do you build emotional enough that sense of peace and purpose that money alone can't buy? How do you design a life that feels genuinely rich, not in a financial sense, but in the quality of your time, your relationships, and your days? That's the heart of life after enough. So if there's one thing I hope you take away from this episode, it's that FIRE isn't really about retirement. It's about reclamation, reclaiming your time, reclaiming your energy, reclaiming your right to choose what your life actually looks like long before you're 65. For me, FIRE has always been about freedom, about choice, about creating enough financial stability to build a life that finally felt like mine. One that gave me the flexibility to support the people I love, to explore new paths, and to live with a bit more intention. But as we'll keep exploring in this podcast, freedom only matters if you know how to use it. Because once you reach enough, the question becomes, what do I actually want to do with this? If this episode has lit even a small spark for you, here are 3 simple things you can start doing this week. Number 1, find your number. Multiply your annual spending by 25. That's your rough enough target. Don't stress if it feels huge. It's not a deadline. It's just some direction. Number 2, track your savings rate. Forget your income for a second. Focus on the percentage you save or invest. That one number says more about how close you are to freedom than any salary ever will. Number 3, design your why. Ask yourself why you want financial independence, what you would do with the time, the energy, and the space it creates. Because if you don't know that, the numbers will never feel enough. Even small shifts like this, saving a little more, spending a little more consciously, can buy you years of freedom later. I hope you enjoyed this episode, a little 101 on the world of FIRE, and a reminder that financial independence isn't about the numbers on a screen. It's about building the foundation for the life you actually want to live. I'm your host, Nick, and this has been Life After Enough. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time. Thanks for listening to Life After Enough, a podcast about money, meaning, and the life you design when work becomes optional. If this episode made you rethink your future, share it with someone who's starting to question the script too. You can follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Nick, and I'll see you next week as we keep building a life that's truly ours.